I was in a convoy that a couple of IEDs. We took IEDs to a couple of vehicles. I had a couple of friends that lost their lives, and that's why I say there's not very many things that I can experience now out on the road in the trucking industry that my experience in the Army being deployed didn't already prepare me for mentally and emotionally and physically.
Right. We couldn't say it enough. Venson, thank you for your service. 8 years in the Army. Welcome to Six Figure Trucker, the podcast where we share advice on how to be successful in trucking and have fun while doing so. We'll share stories, news, and advice on how to earn six figures in trucking, and we'll speak to guys and gals that are already doing so. Let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Six Figure Trucker. We talk with truck drivers all across the country, brought to you by Norton Transport. We have a lot of drivers that have a lot of experiences to share with you, a lot of lessons, a lot of life stories. And joining us tonight on this episode of the Six Figure Trucker is Venson Johnson. Venson, how are you?
I'm great, sir. How about yourself?
Man, I couldn't do any better. If I were doing any better, it'd be a Class C felony. Some people understand that. Most do not.
I know what you mean.
So tell us where you are tonight, Venson.
Right now, I am in Lawrenceburg, North Carolina. I deliver some trucks here for Magnet Transport, and just so happens that my daughter's going to college here, so I actually was able to take a couple of days off and spend with her, so here I am.
That's the name of the game there, particularly in drive-away trucking, is to plan your loads, but and it's a benefit, an added bonus, I guess, when you can do something with your family. Tell us about how that came to be and what your daughter is involved in.
I started my trucking career out in Tennessee, which is where she started her softball career, and this has been something that she's been wanting to do, and this is actually something that she kind of put together herself, and I'm pretty proud of her to be able to put this together and also, to be able to have the opportunity to have the trucking entwined with being able to be a part of this experience with her, because it's a challenge, a lot of times to be a truck driver, also to be equally involved with your kids as well. So it's been a blessing to have that balance and to see this, play out.
It's obviously, no pun intended, playing out tonight. Tell us what's on tap for this evening with you and your daughter.
Well, she and I have kind of thing that we've been doing for like the last 5 years, where we like to challenge each other a little bit of bowling. So we're going to grab something to eat and try to get some bowling in, because both of us are pretty competitive. So that's kind of our way of still being able to challenge each other a little bit. And it's always a good time. Sometimes she kicks my butt, sometimes I kick her butt. So
that was my
looking forward to that.
That was my next question. Who's going to win?
Well, like I said, a lot of times, sometimes, she gets the best of me, and then sometimes I get the best of her. So, like I said, it's the opportunity for us to still be able to, do something that we kind of created, in the past that we really still enjoy.
Gotcha. How long have you been bowling? Is it something that you've been doing for a long time, or just recently picked up with your daughter, or what about that?
I've always kind of, bowled here and there, but like I said, once her and I kind of took it serious, I'm a little bit more invested than just kind of doing it casually. And I'm not a great bowler, but I'm pretty decent. And I guess bowling with her as consistent as I have, it's got I'm a lot better at it than when I first started.
Gotcha. What do you roll on a good night?
I don't know. I'm consistently about 200.
Nice. That's nothing to sneeze at right there.
Sometimes it's better than that. Sometimes it's worse than that. But I mean, that's about the average of it. And like I said, being how competitive she and I are, it's a lot of fun.
Gotcha. Is she your only child, or do you have other children?
Actually, she has a sister that's 14 years old. That she's chasing the same pursuit that her sister is in softball. She wants to do the same thing with soccer.
Gotcha.
So I'm having to feed a softball and a soccer player, so it's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun. They keep me young.
Now, just if you don't mind me asking, how old are you, Venson?
I am 44 years old, sir.
How long have you been on the road, Venson?
Since 2005, 17 years.
Wow. So this is kind of old hat to you. What pushed you into this industry? And let's back up just a little bit. What did you do before you got into truck driving?
I was in the Army for 8 years, and as far as the trucking goes, I've been wanting to be a truck driver since I was 8 years old. My dad owned trucks. We had a neighbor across the street that was, at that time, my dad was a local truck driver, but our neighbor had an over-the-road truck. And, man, that just kind of fascinated me. And then my dad kind of went back and forth with local and over-the-road because they were kind of in the logging/lumber/flatbed part of trucking. So, I mean, ever since then, you know, my brother and sister, they'd be out there wanting to play basketball and baseball and all that, but I'd be out there. I'd figure out what was going on with the trucks. So it's kind of been instilled in me.
What about it kind of got in your blood? I mean, being 8 years old, seeing the trucks, I mean, was it just a natural attraction, or kind of take us back to that time when you were a young boy and fell in love with it?
I think it was more the mechanical side of it. I'd see them, back there working on trucks and working on engines and working on trailers, and all of that just kind of fascinated me. And I, a lot of times I felt like I was probably getting on their nerves and asking them 1,000 questions. But, now at this point, I'm so grateful that they were patient enough to explain to me all the things that I was curious about, which has me where I'm at today.
How much did that help you? I mean, you've been doing this, what did we say, 17 years on the job. How that interest and that passion that you had when you were 8 years old, when you first got introduced to the trucking world, how much does that help you today? Does the passion carry on? Yes,
sir. It has a lot to do with it because, you're able to appreciate, the good days and days because, a lot of days my dad would come home and my grandfather would come home and they would be extremely frustrated, just from, things not going the way that they had it planned out. But also, too, there were a lot of great days that, they were, stoked about, driving a truck, being in the industry, and making me understand that it's a very important piece of America. And just, that made me have an appreciation for, the industry and and my desire to get into the trucking industry because you didn't realize how important the trucking industry was to your day-to-day life.
You made a really good point there. You saw at a young age, as through your eyes, looking at your father and grandfather there, the highs and the lows of the trucking industry. That's, I would think, has proven to be invaluable for you today.
Yes, sir. I cannot describe that enough. And I was always taught that, a lot of guys that I talk to talk about the money. If you just drive that truck, the money will come. They always said that they weren't doing it for the money, although, they provided a pretty good living for us, but they never done it to go down the road, for the economics of it. They done it because it was their passion. It was because, it was what they desired to do to make a living. And, they done it because they really, really, really love driving trucks.
Gotcha. And I'm sure that's something that's carried on to you. Obviously, you've been doing it for 17 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Another thing you mentioned there when coming up with your father and grandfather, them being involved in the industry, and you realized at an early age, or it became more relevant to you later, this is an important piece of America. Tell us a little bit about that from your standpoint, because obviously you're behind the wheel. Firsthand.
But, a lot of times, when you talk to people about the trucking industry, they talk about the frustration with the traffic and the going down the road and all of that. But, man, I realize that a lot of things that I touch and that's in my house and that, keeps my household alive comes off the back of a truck or off the side of a truck. And it just, makes you appreciate, the industry just, for me, not just as being a driver, but just being a consumer, that, man, it's you can't live, honestly, without the trucking industry. So when I wake up every day and I feel like in being a transporter, that is like the first leg of the trucking industry. So it means a lot to make that contribution, to be able to start off the trucking industry and delivering trucks to, customers so that, the trucking industry can turn.
Right. You're being very modest and humble about it because, I mean, let's be real. I mean, this country would come to a screeching halt without the trucking industry when everything that's,
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's obvious. I mean, not only obvious, but a fact. Being a part of that, being, I guess, a spoke in the wheel is, how would you describe that feeling that it gives you?
Well, I try, and in my 17 years in the trucking industry, I've gotten frustrated with it and taken a pause and went down the rabbit hole of sales and like I said, and it's just, I don't know, the feeling that I get from the trucking and driving being a part of the trucking industry, I hadn't been able to get that from any other occupation or profession that I've dabbled in when pausing from the trucking industry. And, when I talk to people now that's wanting to get into the trucking industry, I let them know that, hey, it's a lifestyle. And and a lot of people say they want to get into it, and then they get into it, and then they realize that, hey, it's a challenge that it's not, that they can't handle. And when you hear people say that, for me, it's just like, man, I really am tough as nails, because a lot of people say I couldn't do what you do. So whenever I hear someone say that to me, it's extremely refreshing to hear that, because it makes me feel good about the choice that I chose to embrace being a truck driver for as long as I've been a truck driver.
Gotcha. Let's dive a little deeper and kind of pick apart some of those things you were talking about there. When you were talking with people who are thinking about, guys and girls that are thinking about getting into the trucking industry, drive-away trucking specifically, and they tell you that you're a tough guy because they couldn't do that. What parts are they talking about? What's the hardest part for people to, I guess, wrap their head around or say commit to doing?
Well, as far as the drive-away goes, I mean, I think a lot of things that gets people is just, you're driving a truck, you're pulling 2 or 3 trucks, and your length is what really fascinates people. And I think also too, not only are you a truck driver, you got to be a little bit mechanically inclined, because when you get the trucks to their destination, you kind of put them back together. So when you mention that to people, I think that challenges them a little bit, in their head, because most people aren't as mechanically inclined as they are aware of. But because I was that way when I first started, but the more I'd done it, I was like, the more I decided, and I've worked in a lot of different entities in the trucking industry, but hey, to me, this is my favorite entity in trucking, because you get to drive a new truck all the time, and you really actually get to see the country, because, you don't just bump a dock and go to the truck stop. You actually get to, drive, 500-600 miles a day and stop somewhere and get to check out, really where you are, versus, like I said, and I'm not taking anything away from bumping docks. It's just, in my experience in the different entities that I've been involved in and experienced in the trucking industry, this is just, to me, you're really able to embrace seeing the country.
Gotcha. Now, you talk about bumping docks there. Did you start off doing that, or kind of walk us through your career back in 2005 when you started there?
I started out flatbedding and the company that I started out with was TMC, and I was just fascinated that they had those shiny black trucks and the aluminum was polished on them. And when I first saw the trucks, when I got out of the truck, they came and gave us the spiel about going to work for who you're going to go to work for in truck driving school. I said, hey, sign me up, because, like I said, I guess maybe it was the whole discipline and from the Army, and I'd heard that TNC was particular about the trucks and all that, so that was kind of where I got started at, and I'd done that for about 5 years, and then I went from that to refrigeration, reefers.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now, you were talking about your experience in the Army gave you the discipline. Did you drive any trucks, any heavy equipment in the Army?
I did. I was a mechanic, but a lot of times, when something breaks, you have to go and recover it and bring it back and fix it and drive it back. And when I was deployed, I was kind of a little bit of everything. So, and I'll say that, driving a truck here driving a truck deployed gave me a lot of confidence to drive in just about every scenario that I've driven in out over the road.
I gotcha. Well, first of all, thank you for your service, Venson. And where were you deployed and for how long?
I deployed to Iraq twice. I was there for a year both times, and I went to Afghanistan once, and I was there for a year.
Were you driving a truck out there during your deployment?
In Iraq, I was. In Afghanistan, not so much.
Gotcha.
There wasn't really a whole lot of trucks to be driven because it was kind of a different experience in Afghanistan versus Iraq.
I got you. Tell us, driving a truck in Iraq when that was going on, I would think that would have its challenges and, fearful at sometimes, or at least the potential to be scary.
Every day that you woke up to drive that truck, you didn't know, you had no clue what you were going to get. So it was a challenge mentally, emotionally, and like I said, your preparation for that will just about prepare you, I feel, for anything that you'll experience out on the road. So that's why I have a lot of guys call me, wanting insight about situations, because when I initially meet them, just in talking to them, they can tell that, hey, A, I take a lot of pride in this, and B, I don't come out here to do this. Of course, like I said, I'm trying to make a living, but I don't come out here chasing a paycheck because I feel like that you kind of lose sight of, a couple of things that, the trucking industry has to offer if you're out here just running hard, trying to make a dollar, you lose sight of, trying to do the job safe. And, I see, especially now in my latter days of my experience in the trucking industry, that you see a lot of guys that, when I first started, man, you still had a whole lot of the old school trucking out on the road. And it's not so much now because, it's, courtesy to other drivers and just guys taking pride in being in the industry.
Gotcha. You were talking about when you were in the Army and being deployed overseas in a hostile environment, driving a truck prepared you for anything. You were a young man, if I'm doing the math correctly here, when you were deployed. What was your state of mind? Were you like, what have I gotten myself into? Or what was your state of mind when you were there? And how did you battle through that?
Well, I had an uncle, when I joined, he had already been in the Army for like 17 or 18 years. So, whenever he would come home, over the years when I've talked to him, prior to my joining, you'd hear about, his experiences. So, before I joined, I kind of knew what I was signing up for. And, when your preparation prior to deployment, you don't really, especially your first deployment, you don't really realize how serious you should take the preparation. And then you actually deploy and, all the things that, senior seasoned guys are telling you, you don't really, you're not able to really appreciate that until you're on the ground. And then you get on the ground and then they say, hey, we got to move this here. And then here, you're in that situation. And the first time that you go out, like you said, you ask yourself, what have I got myself into? But as you do it more and more and more and more, you get more confident as far as in what to prepare yourself and how to prepare yourself, for that experience.
Right. Did you see any close calls? I'm sure you saw, some friends that got into some very sticky situations. And what about for yourself first? Let's start there. Did you have any close calls personally?
I was in a convoy that a couple of IEDs, we took IEDs to a couple of vehicles. I had a couple of friends that lost their lives. And, that's why I say there's not very many things that I can experience now out on the road in the trucking industry that my experience in the Army being deployed didn't already prepare me for mentally and emotionally and physically.
Right. That's like a teacher that few people have ever had. When you see that kind of thing up close and personal, and do you draw back on that experience, I guess that mental toughness on a daily basis?
I do, and I try to convey that, to especially new drivers, and a lot of times I'll see drivers at the truck stop and I'll see them doing small things. And, I used to not chime in, but now it's, even if I know that it may trouble them a little bit for me to chime in with them, I chime in with them to make, to try to raise their awareness to let them know that, hey, although, we're not in a hostile situation, but and you have a lot of responsibility in, holding a commercial driver's license and operating a commercial vehicle to appreciate, the fact that, hey, you have the qualifications and you have the skills and you have the mindset and obviously in doing the job every day, you're making yourself more and more mentally and emotionally tough to do the job. So that's what I usually, try to convey to guys that I stumble upon, at the fuel islands and, or, whenever I'm delivering trucks, a lot of people, especially when you're delivering trucks, they don't understand all the things that comes with getting a load of trucks from point A to point B. And then, they come out and they start talking to you, and then you start to fill in the gaps that, that they're kind of vague about. And they're able to appreciate, the job that you're doing.
I guess, when you look at it, when you see a deck load and it's, do you take 3, 4 at a time usually?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I guess that's a thing that's naturally interesting to a lot of people out on the road. Is that what you find?
Yes, sir. I mean, we have guys that's been doing it a long time, and, these are, oversized guys or, guys that are hauling, wide loads. And, even they'll say, I don't see how y'all do it, because, you've got 2 or 3 pivot points. And, if you've done it long enough, you can't back up. But if you have to back up, now that requires, some time and some skills. But also, too, you have to be a little bit more detailed in planning your trip, versus a regular, tractor trailers. But, a lot of guys that, like I said, are fascinated, at the fact that you're driving a truck and you're pulling the truck and all the pivot points and your lane.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a horse and 3 behind it. We've talked to a lot of deck drivers here on the Six Figure Trucker, brought to you by Norton Transport. Venson Johnson, if you're just joining us now. But I wanted to kind of circle back to what you were talking about. You can't back up. Have you ever had to back up?
I have.
And tell us about that.
Well, there's a guy that's the yard guy, and he kind of, sets trucks and parks trucks where it situates trucks when it's supposed to be. And I watched him a couple of times, and he was backing up, 3 ways and 4 ways. And I had to ask him, I said, man, what is the key to doing this? And he said, typically, with the tractor trailer, you're focused on what's going on with, the back end of the trailer versus, with a 3-way, he told me several times, hey, don't worry about what the front truck's doing. So you're trying to steer the front truck to control the second truck to make the third truck do what you want it to. And it is extremely complex. And you have to be extremely patient.
I couldn't even imagine trying to do that. I guess the way you were describing there, it's kind of like a sort of a domino effect as far as what impacts the truck behind it. And I mean, when you were able to back up, I mean, I'm sure that's an extreme level of concentration to do that.
It is. And like I said, you try not to put yourself in those situations by paying attention to, where you're going, paying attention to, where you're going to stop. But there are certain situations and there's certain times that you can't do anything about it. And, you can either cost yourself a lot of time and cost the company a lot of money by, having, somebody come out and have to undeck you and redeck. Or you can take the time and be patient and teach yourself how to get yourself out of those situations. And I've been blessed to have those, that skill to be able to be patient in the times that I've gotten myself in situations that I had to get myself out of. And like I said, I wasn't trying to cost myself any more time, and I also wasn't wanting to cost, the company more money that was, entailed in transporting that load of truck.
Gotcha. Being a deck driver, you got to be forward thinking, no pun intended, because you were talking about don't put yourself in those situations. I guess you're always thinking about how am I getting out of here, wherever here may be.
Right. And a lot of guys want to go from driving a tractor trailer or hauling singles to hauling deck loads. And undecking the truck requires some training too, but I also think that there's a lot that comes with the training that, a great trainer will show you. It may be cool to stay in a place that you would prefer to stay, but if that place doesn't accommodate you to stay there, that you can't stay there. Or, a lot of times what I've learned is that you got to kind of put yourself on a schedule where you can get yourself off the road and in situations where, you don't put yourself in bad situations.
Mm-hmm. What about when you're making a delivery and, you're talking about there, like the hotel, I mean, as far as accommodating you, the parking lot, can you get the 4 trucks in there? Can you get them out? But I was just thinking about, you probably do most of your driving, try to do it on the freeway, but what about when you get on some of these backcountry roads that take you to where you got to drop them? How difficult is that?
Well, like I said, that's a part of planning your trip. A lot of times, when you get a load of trucks, they may have it laid out to deliver this way. And, if you plan your trip and it's a road that doesn't accommodate, you having, 3 or 4 trucks, you may have to change your strategy in how you're going to deliver those trucks so that you don't put yourself in those situations. And, like I said, if you've done this long enough, you'll know that how important it is to plan your trip. Now, you may want to do 600 miles, but the parking scenario, the parking situation may not accommodate you, so you may have to stop short. It's just small things like that, prevent you from getting yourself in situations that you probably shouldn't be in.
I got you. Now, you started on a flatbed, and now you're driving 4 trucks at a time. What happened in between those times? When you started with a flatbed, kind of move us through the progression of what got you to, what some sees as the pinnacle of, obviously, in drive-away trucking, you're moving forward at a time, but kind of fill in the blanks for us from the flatbed to where you are now.
I drove flatbed, like I said, for TMC for, I think, right around 5 years, and I went from there. I pulled a reefer out over the road for, 3 or 4 years. And then I got kind of curious about the ag side of trucking. And I had an opportunity to work for a farmer, which, I learned so many things. Around trucking and the ag aspect of trucking. And then I kind of got into a phase where my daughters were getting a little bit older. And I kind of felt like I needed to take some time out from over the road, and I drove a dump truck for probably about 5 years, and hey, that right there is an experience as well.
I bet.
It's an experience as well. And then, like I said, I've always been kind of curious about different entities of the trucking industry, so that's kind of what steered my, what I chose to do in regards to, jobs to hold in the trucking industry. I've always needed to provide a living for my family, but also too, my curiosity about trucking, it kind of balanced the whole making a living, but also being able to feed my curiosity in different entities in the trucking industry.
Gotcha. Now, take us through one of each there in the agricultural aspect and in the dump truck. I'm sure you've got some funny times that came out of both of those, or some very memorable experiences that happened in either one of those. Kind of relive one of those for us. Take us down memory road and share an experience with us that you had in those 2 different types of trucks.
Well, on the ag side of it, you attention to detail. It taught me attention to detail because I was pulling a grain hopper and we were shelling corn. It was corn harvest time. And I just dumped a load of corn, and I was moving faster and thinking faster than I needed to be doing. And when I pulled up, he pulled up with a combine to dump corn on me, and I didn't have my doors closed on the bottom of the hopper. So we dumped about 2,000 bushels, probably about 500 bushels of corn on the ground.
Oh boy!
And that was an expensive lesson, but like the guy that I was working for was a really good guy, and He said it happened to us all. He said just try to learn from it and move on. And when I was driving a dump truck, I had learned to spread rock, and I was working for an asphalt company, and we were building a road. And when you're spreading rock, you have to hook your chain. So my boss was on the road grader, and he wanted me to spread a load of rock out in front of him. So we were finishing putting the base down so that we could start paving. And I felt good about, he was talking to me on the radio, what he wanted me to do, and I felt really good about it. So I get up there in front of him, and I raise my band up, and I take off, and I pop my tailgate, and I forgot to hook my chain, so instead of spreading it out 2 inches, I left it about 24 inches.
You got finished with the job a lot quicker there, but then you had a lot of cleanup to do.
I did. So, those experiences like that taught me, things in regards to your attention to detail. And also, too, I had the chance to learn how to operate equipment that's around the trucking industry. Like I learned how to run a combine. I learned how to, drive a tractor, with a grain cart. I learned how to, haul dirt with the track loader and, by myself, So I'm so grateful and so thankful for each experience that I've had in each entity of the trucking industry, because I've learned so much. I learned how to haul equipment, which when I first started out at the asphalt hauling job, I was just a dump truck driver.
Right.
But I ended up, when I left that job, I was hauling equipment for them. So, like I said, I'm so grateful and so thankful for each experience, because I learned so much from each experience.
How much does that carry over to what you do now? I mean, all that you learned, from different facets of trucking, but, I'm sure that they are relatable to decking trucks.
Oh, I got to be honest with you. I don't think I would have the confidence to do this job had I not experienced, each entity of the trucking industry that I've chosen, to be involved with. Hauling equipment is really close to, hauling deck loads of trucks, because, you're loading a piece of equipment. You got to tie it down. You got to make sure that your load's secure, but also, too, with all the deck trucks, you got to make sure that your load's secured, but also, too, you don't want to hurt yourself in undecking trucks. It's the same as you don't want to, hurt yourself with, loading a piece of equipment or spreading rock on the truck, or, just each experience, like I said, has prepared me to do this job with a lot of confidence.
Gotcha. What's the funniest thing you've seen as a deck driver?
Probably, I know I shouldn't say this is funny, but.
Hey, we're wide open here on the Six Figure Trucker. You can talk about anything. Lay it out there, Vincent.
So I pulled up to a place to undeck a load of trucks, and there was a guy, he had the same setup that I had, the three-way. Well, when I pulled up, there was oil all over the ground. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to figure out how in the heck did he bust that oil pan? Because I knew that much oil, he had to have busted the oil pan.
Right.
So I was trying to figure out, how did he bust that oil pan? So of course I couldn't undeck, because they didn't want me in there, because they were trying to clean up all the oil, because you got 8 or 10 gallons of oil all over the ground. Mm-hmm. And then I get to, of course, I walk up there to see what's going on, and I asked him what happened. And he said, man, I forgot to scotch the wheels, and the truck rolled back, and the block on the back of the FES busted the oil pan. And I was like, oh my goodness. Ooh. Which I knew, and that's, and it could happen to anybody, but to me, guys that do that kind of stuff, it's all about the training. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the training that I got was phenomenal.
Now, you've been on both sides of training, right?
Yes, sir.
Which one did you enjoy the most?
I don't know. It's all equally the same, because, you get to leave your fingerprint, and, but also, too, it's when you're receiving training, it's a gauge of what to do, what not to do. Because everybody has their way of doing things.
I would think, from what we've heard from you, when you went through your training, you were very much a sponge.
Yes, sir.
And is that something that you try to impart upon the ones you're training?
I like it that, you're going to learn some bad habits, and a lot of the habits that you learn are good habits. I tell guys that, hey, try to keep the bad habits at a minimum. But if you plan a load of trucks from when you get them until you fly back to get the next load of trucks, if you can keep the bad habits at a minimum, you'll succeed. Because, obviously we're trying to do the job effectively, but we're trying to do the job safely, but you're trying to be as cost effective as you can too. If you haul 10 loads of trucks and you got claims on 10 loads of trucks, I mean, you kind of worked against the purpose.
Right. You strike me as a system guy. Do you have a system that you follow? I mean,
I have a system for every setup that I haul, and the guys sometimes they'll want to help me undeck my trucks, and I'll say, honestly, to tell you the truth, you're just going to get in my way by helping me, because I'm more effective with sticking to my system.
What is your system?
I just, when I pull up, I start from the front of my lead truck, and I work my way to the back, and then come back around, and I'm trying to accomplish a couple of things. I don't want to leave a mess, so I'm cleaning up as I go. But also, two, I'm trying to be effective with my time in breaking these trucks apart and putting them back together. But I'm also, too, trying not to, damage the trucks or bring harm to myself.
Gotcha.
So I found a system that works for me where I can accomplish all of those things. I can keep my claims at a minimum, and I'm, doing the job effectively as far as time goes as well.
Gotcha. You're listening to the Six Figure Trucker, brought to you by Norton Transport, and we're listening to Venson Johnson right now. He's a veteran driver and also a veteran, and as we said, we couldn't say it enough. Venson, thank you for your service, 8 years in the Army, and what we've gathered from talking with Venson here for a little bit, you take a lot of pride, as you said, in what you do. And what, for you, kind of give us an idea of what you take the pride in?
I think the trucking industry still has a black eye from the older days. So whenever I speak to people about being in the trucking industry, and especially being a transporter, is that, hey, how the trucking industry used to be isn't how the trucking industry is today. So when I tell someone that I'm a transporter or I'm a truck driver, it's not about the pride that I take in doing the job. It's also the pride that I in saying that. Right. Because you never know who's listening to you or who's watching you that's curious about getting into the trucking industry. So I try to be a great spokesman with my actions and how I speak about the trucking industry, because, don't get me wrong, there's things about the trucking industry that frustrate me, but I'm not going to let that affect, how much pride I take in doing the job and being a part of the trucking industry.
I got you.
So the trucks have changed a lot. And even though, the newer trucks are a lot different than the older trucks, hey, I'm still able to appreciate, just the trucking industry, just the trucks, and all the people that are involved to make the trucking industry, happen. Whenever I go to if I have to take a shower in the truck stop, I think, I think the people that are cleaning the showers, because people don't realize how important that is. If they don't do their job, then a shower is important to a driver.
Oh, absolutely.
So I try to appreciate every single aspect of the trucking industry. Nobody to me is more important or less important than anybody, because we need all these pieces a part of the trucking industry to make it run smooth, or as smooth as possible.
Well said, well said. How important is it to you to be a part of changing that perception that some people may hold against the trucking industry? How important is it for you to be an agent of change?
Like I said, I try to, whenever people ask me about the trucking industry, I do everything that I can to bring awareness, to let them know that, hey, it's a different age, it's a different era. The people that are in the trucking industry are, it's different. There's people out here that do take pride in doing this job, and there's a couple of bad apples that are out on the road. But I tell them all the time that they don't don't let that be your perception of the trucking industry, because you had a bad experience out on the road with a bad apple, because there's a lot of great drivers out here. And there's a lot of, drivers out here that take a lot of pride in doing this. And, and we don't want to have that black eye going on and on and on and over and over and over and over. So I try to. It doesn't matter if you're a new driver or a seasoned driver. I just, even if you can appreciate it or if you can't appreciate it, I try to leave my fingerprint with everybody that I talk to try to, change the perception of the trucking industry. Some people have been in the trucking industry for a long time and just have a bad attitude about it, which especially those people, I try to tell them, hey, obviously for you to be in the trucking industry, as long as you've been in it, there's something about it that you're able to appreciate it about it. And there's something that you want to change. The only way that you're going to be able to change that is to have a voice. And, you see somebody doing something that, you feel like that would make it better. Hey, you have the opportunity to use the voice that you have. Mm-hmm. And you never know who you talk to that you may be able to influence to change their perspective just a little bit just by, having a chat with them briefly about, the industry. Or the job.
And the impact that may have on them, whether you know it or not.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Now, you've been in it 17 years. How much have you seen the industry change due to technology? I mean, we know on our side here at Norton, we value technology a lot, the technology we put in the hands of our drivers. From a driver's standpoint, how much have you seen it change and how much has it advanced and helped the whole industry?
Well, I got to be honest with you. When I came in, we were still running paper log. So at first, I was like, "Oh, I can't do this. I'm not, with the ELDs and the electronic logs." I was like, I went on a campaign for 5 months where I swore I was going to get out of the industry. But just like anything that's new to you or to an environment, you're not going to prefer it. But the more that you embrace it, the better that I've learned that it's made the industry because yeah, there are times that you would probably like to cheat the system or cheat it and get a little further up the road. But I've seen, situations and heard of situations where a situation probably could have been prevented had it, had this been in place or had this been, implemented or, had this been taken more serious. But I think that the advancement of technology has probably made trucking a little bit safer. And some people will disagree with me about that. But, I mean, it's, if you're smart and doing your job, I guess technology is doing its best to try to prevent some of the black eyes that the trucking industry has had. Clean some of that up.
I got you. You're listening to Venson Johnson here on the Six Figure Trucker, brought to you by Norton Transport. And Venson, you said a few minutes ago that you look at it as not chasing a paycheck. Kind of elaborate on that, because I think you had also said you're missing out or you lose sight of what this industry has to offer.
Well, like, a lot of guys, that have a job that's paying this per mile or this percentage of the job. I always ask guys. My dad said this to me, and it always stuck to me. He told me, "Don't you never start a job broke." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, if you start a job not in a good situation, you will never, either A, you'll never be able to appreciate that interview or that job that you chose because you're always trying to get back to the good, or you're going to be so reckless with doing the job because you're just chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing, where if you'll put yourself in a situation where you don't have to start a job out that way, you're able to start that job with ease and no stress, and you can truly decide if this is the place for you versus I need this job or I need this opportunity to make this.
Right. I got you.
And I've always that's always kind of stuck with me. And I always try to tell guys, that say, well, I hate this job. Well, how did you walk into that situation? Most guys that I talk to, when you listen to them talk, they start out a new opportunity at a job and they started out, where
down in the hole.
It's from a negative
right.
Down in the hole. So now it's a climb where if you're able to start out, and there's so many things that comes from that, where if you start a job in a good way, 9 times out of 10, you left the last opportunity in a good way.
Right.
So there's just so many things that I've learned that you can set yourself up for the future opportunity in a good way, and you leave the last opportunity in a good way.
Right.
So I've always tried not to start a job, in the hole.
You're listening to the wisdom of Venson Johnson here on the Six Figure Trucker, brought to you by Norton Transport. And, we talked a little bit at the beginning of our conversation about your family, and you said you're not chasing a paycheck per se, but I guess being a deck driver, it's been nice for what you can share with your family.
My father and my grandfather, you never wondered, well, when are they going to be home? Because you kind of had, even as a young kid, you had figured out their scheduling and their timing. So that kind of stuck with me because it doesn't, and my oldest daughter made me understand that, hey, I don't care about the money, I care about the time. So I always tried to make as much time as I could for my kids because, like she said, they don't care about I think a lot of times the adults are putting way more emphasis on the economics of versus the time. And my kids taught me that, hey, understand that you're trying to make a living, but hey, we want you to be a part of our day-to-day as well. So I've always tried to find the balance in making a living, but also, too, giving them the most valuable thing that I have, which is my time.
Being a parent of 2 daughters there, you talk about the time, they're not going to be children forever. I mean, you take that into consideration as far as putting the value on time over money. Yes,
sir. I'm grateful that I've had that appreciation because, I've got friends that have been in the trucking industry that, they've had a successful trucking career, but man, that, you talk to them about family life and it's not the greatest. So I always tell guys that, man, if you can find the balance in your family time and take some pride in driving that truck and pick the right entity and the thing that you want to do, the money's going to show up if you keep that left door closed.
Gotcha. Keep that left door closed, yeah. Now, what would you say to people who are listening to the Six Figure Trucker and have come across this podcast and may be considering moving into drive-away transport, drive-away trucking, and maybe graduating up to being a deck driver? What would your words of advice be, Vincent, to those people?
Well, a couple of things. One, set yourself up for the transition because there's a transition phase, especially if you've been doing something, been in a certain entity of the trucking industry, and it's provided you the economics and a living that you prefer. It's a learning curve. It's a transition. So set yourself up for it. And the second thing is that try to go somewhere where you're going to get some really, really, really good training because I can't speak enough about the training because I was truly blessed to get some really good training. I started out with a company and then I transitioned over, here to Norton. And I think the reason why I've had as much success at Norton since I've been here is because of the training that I got. So do a little bit of research and get an understanding for what you're getting yourself into because it's hauling, deck loads. It's different than any other entity in the trucking industry.
Gotcha. You've heard a lot of wisdom, nuggets of knowledge here from Venson Johnson here on the Six Figure Trucker. Vincent, we're about to wrap up here because I know it's getting close to that time where you're about to have some dinner and bowling with the daughter there. So how do you feel about your chances tonight on the bowling alley?
I got to be honest with you. There's been nights that I felt really, really good and she crushed me. And then there's been nights that I didn't feel really good and she was off. So it's hit or miss. It all depends on how I feel after we get done eating dinner.
Vincent, thank you so much for joining us here on the Six Figure Trucker. We're honored and pleased to have you here at Norton Transport, and we're honored for you to be on this show with us tonight. And be careful out there and have a great time with your daughter.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Vincent. Catch you next time on the Six Figure Trucker, brought to you by Norton Transport.
Six Figure Trucker is brought to you by Norton Transport. Norton Transport is a drive-away trucking company that customers can rely on. It offers excellent independent contract driving opportunities to professional, courteous, and qualified drivers that can provide the kind of service we deliver. If you're interested in learning more about Norton or just want to subscribe to the show, check out 6-figuretrucker.com. That's 6-figuretrucker.com.